Hey, everybody, welcome back to the podcast. You're listening to the longest running superhero role playing game on Earth. I'm your host, the Game Master. Before we get into today's episode, smash that like button, make sure that you're subscribed, and leave us a comment. That helps us out on our end with the YouTube algorithm, but also we genuinely love hearing from you guys. We have an awesome community here, and that's thanks to you. So, thank you so much for being here. So, having said all of that, let's get into it. Prologue to today's game session begins on Earth 551-954-814, where the current year is now 1959. The Martian Manhunter uses his psionic abilities to locate the escape pod of Kara Zor-El. So he and Batman, the rebel leader, open the pod. And when Kara opens her eyes and looks around, she sees red skies and huge columns of smoke. So she thinks she must be on the wrong planet and says that her father had meant for her to go to Earth. And a very weary Martian Manhunter says, "This is Earth," with Batman chiming in and adding, "What's left of it." Kara asks what happened here, and the rebels explain that Darkseid's quote unquote son, Kal-El, took out the Justice Society about half a decade ago. Kara looks horrified and explains that she's actually the cousin of Kal-El. Batman asks if that means that she has all the same powers that he does, and she says that she does. So Batman comments that he has an idea. He says that before the world went mad, there was a scientist named Professor Dalton who built something that might be exactly what they need right now. Which brings us to the main plot of this game session. Man of Steel and his wife, Wonder Woman, use a boom tube to travel to Earth. And as soon as the portal makes its notorious boom sound, Kara can hear that with her super hearing, so she flies there. Superman asks who she is, and she explains. And for the Superman of this universe, this is actually the first time he's hearing about things like Krypton or who his biological parents even were. So he's kind of stunned. Wonder Woman sees this and is sort of worried. After all, most forms of tyranny hate information. They want all knowledge to be under their control, and they work to erase any facts that are inconvenient to their regime. So she tells her husband that that doesn't matter. The point is that Darkseid raised him, and they serve Darkseid. Diana stresses that sooner or later, everybody will serve Darkseid or perish. Supergirl says she'd rather die than serve Darkseid, and Wonder Woman says that can be arranged. So we roll initiative, and it's Superman who gets to go first. He tries to grapple with Kara but fails. He also speaks on his turn, telling her not to resist. That as a family member of his, that means that she is family to Darkseid as well. Kara is then next to go, so she steals Wonder Woman's lasso and ties Diana up with it. On Wonder Woman's turn, she rolls dice and fails, so she basically accomplishes nothing. On Martian Manhunter's turn, he reads the mind of Wonder Woman, trying to learn anything that might help the rebels. And finally, on Batman's turn, he unleashes his secret weapon. He uses the mother box that he stole from Granny Goodness and opens a boom tube, and out pours tons and tons of bizarro supergirls. They swarm the Man of Steel, and if it was one on one, each of them would have roughly a 50% chance of landing a hit. And each hit would, on average, take about half of Superman's hit points. But this for sure counts as a multi tack when you have an entire army of these girls. And the more people that you have all attacking a guy at once keeps adding bonuses to hit. So the Man of Steel is overwhelmed. And as we said before, this Batman in this universe has been through so much that he doesn't have the no kill rule that almost every other Batman in the multiverse has. So he actually orders his Bizarro army to finish off Kal-El, and they do. Reinforcements from Apocalypse then pour through yet another boom tube. An evil version of Billy Batson, who's been brainwashed by Granny Goodness, yells out Shazam. He transforms into an evil version of Captain Marvel, and he tears into the closest Bizarro Supergirl, doing extra damage because he's magical. Right behind him, parademons pour through too. And now, instead of them bellowing for Darkseid, which is kind of the thing parademons often say, they instead yell Shazam. And they become thunder demons, each with the same powers as Captain Marvel. So they too strike at this army of Bizarro Supergirls. And they do extra damage since these Bizarros all inherited Kara's vulnerability to magic. And at the end of the day, what it comes down to is that Batman only had so many hours to make a Bizarro, while Darkseid has had all the time in the world to make parademons. So the bad guys outnumber the good guys, and it's actually the bad guys who win this battle. The Thunder Demons grapple with the Martian Manhunter, saying Shazam over and over again. This is a bit like what we saw in Kingdom Come when Captain Marvel fought Superman. But it also shows that each parademon sees itself as disposable, and it is a fanatic for Darkseid. So it will absolutely give its life for that cause. Martian Manhunter is taken back to Apocalypse, where Desaad tortures him in the fires of one of the planet's many hell pits. Kara is broken as well and turned into one of Darkseid's female furies. So she goes to Earth and tracks down Batman by his heartbeat, which she remembers from their earlier encounter. Batman, in turn, has what is essentially the Silver Age equivalent of the power armor that we saw him wearing at the end of The Dark Knight Returns. And this Batman was around in the Golden Age, so he's also about the same age as the Frank Miller version of Batman was. But without the plot convenience of a comic book, Supergirl flies high up into the sky, uses telescopic vision to see Batman, then strikes at him with heat vision, cutting the cables that feed power to his armor. Once she's cut the puppet strings, so to speak, she beats on Batman until he's knocked out. Then she takes him back to Apocalypse and she throws him down at the feet of Darkseid. And the Lord of Apocalypse picks up the Dark Knight by his throat, telling him how much he's annoyed him for these past 5 years. Batman kind of grins and says, "That's good to know." So, angry Darkseid throws Batman into the floor. Darkseid steps on Batman's legs, crushing bones under his heel as he starts monologuing. Batman rolls versus willpower to not cry out because he doesn't want to give Darkseid the pleasure. This too annoys Darkseid. So, in one final attempt to break the bat, Darkseid asks him how it feels to know that his whole life has been utterly meaningless. Despite all of his efforts, Batman dies today. Bruce smiles and says, "What makes you think Batman will ever die?" And as if an answer to the question, Darkseid shoots Bruce Wayne with the Omega beams and scatters his molecules throughout the universe. Darkseid then says something to the effect that Batman is no more. Which brings us to the epilogue, which takes place on Earth, which looks like Apocalypse does these days. The skies are red. In the distance, there's these huge columns of smoke, And all of Metropolis is now a depressing urban sprawl of concrete and metal with bulky black pipes snaking through everything like worms. But beneath those streets, not far from the old LexCorp building, there lies an abandoned subway station, which these days serves as a base of operations for the self proclaimed greatest strategic mind of our time, Lex Luthor. Since this is a more Silver Age take on Luthor, it's worth considering that without a Superboy, that means that this Lex was never actually exposed to lab fumes, which made him go prematurely bald, and more importantly, drove him mad. And for sure, this Luthor is absolutely not a fan of what Darkseid is all about. Luthor tells the remaining rebels that while Batman may have died, Batman the symbol will live on forever. But just then, in walks Batman. And not only does he look alive, he looks healthy, young even, and slightly slimmer. Batman says the reports of my death are greatly exaggerated. The rebels stare dumbfounded. Luthor cocks an eyebrow, and as always, his sharp mind has figured it all out. So he simply says, non est puer amplius gravitatem serva aut identitam tuam prodis. Batman nods and gets down to business. He says that the silver lining to this most recent battle is that Kal-El has finally been eliminated, and that's not nothing. Luthor agrees, and they get back to work planning the rebels' next move. And that's where we ended this one. In story form, this one seems incredibly short, but in terms of playing it out, this one took a while because of how many characters were all fighting at once. I like big battle scenes because they're cinematic, but in terms of game mechanics, I've never really found a great way of handling it. So the way I do handle it is I just run it like I would run a fight between any two teams, but we just keep going. And eventually two things happen. The first is that a pattern emerges and we see where it's going, right? And the second is that my players get tired of what we're doing. And that was the case here. We rolled out the whole Bizarro Supergirls versus Shazam Parademons thing. And after a while, it became very clear that the Parademons were the ones that had the advantage. It's also worth mentioning that the way a Kryptonian vulnerability to magic actually works varies depending on who the writer is. But I feel like there have been some really great stories where Superman and Captain Marvel are slugging it out for a while. And this is one instance where I actually ignore the DC Heroes rules about Clark having a lost vulnerability to magic, and instead I give him an attack vulnerability to magic. Difference is that with a lost vulnerability, his body drops to a 4, and that magical attacker would either knock him out or kill him in a single round, right? But that goes against too many things we've seen in pop culture over the years. So by going with an attack vulnerability instead, the attacker gets to do more damage than they normally would, but Superman gets to stay in the fight longer. Anyways, that was it for this one. Hopefully you guys enjoyed the video. If so, as always, we'd love it if you took a quick moment of your time to smash like. Make sure that you're still subscribed because YouTube loves to unsubscribe you and never tell you about it. Last but not least, leave us a comment. And from all of us here at the longest running superhero role playing game on earth, we hope you have a good one, and we'll see you in the next adventure. Bye.